Hello everybody, my name is Mike Geig, and how are you doing today? Once again, I'm not really going to wait for you to respond. I'm just throwing the general question out. I'm sure a lot of you will say stuff in chat. So, yeah, apparently a lot of people interested in shooting bears with lasers. We have a lot more people in here than we normally do, so hello everybody. Welcome for the people who are new or have been here before or whatever. How you doing? Okay. So, again, like usual, we don't have anyone but me from Unity presenting, so I'm going to do my best to monitor chat and at the same time teach. Okay, so if you ask a question or a statement or whatever and I don't respond, I'm not ignoring you. I'm not able to keep an eye on everything at the same time. So I do apologize if you have something witty to add or a good question or anything like that and I just don't happen to get to it. I apologize for that. Okay. So, I have to do my promotional plug spiel, which I always do. So, before I start, if you have any questions, comments, considerations, or anything of the like, you can reach us at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, which is me, at Will Goldstone, and at The Ant Ranch. Yeah, that's Twitter, by the way. I guess I didn't say that, but yeah, you can reach us on Twitter. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and whatever. Okay, so that being said, real quick here, so what we're going to do today is, like I had mentioned before, is we are going to learn to shoot laser beams. Now, you see the scene that I have before me is this hex grid from a project Unity did some time ago, and it is freely available on the asset store. You do not need to download this to follow along today. You can create a plane or a giant cube or a piece of terrain or just basically anything you want to stand on. You actually don't even need to do any of that either. I mean, you can just be suspended in space. It doesn't really matter. I just wanted to bring something a little bit more visually appealing to make this, kind of look professional, not like some hack job. But you don't need to actually have this. You can go get it if you want. It's on the asset store. That's actually how I found it. I was like, hey, let's find something neat for today. So I went to the asset store, and well, it's going to take a while to load. But anyway, if you to find stuff like this, I just generally go to Complete Projects Tutorial section in the asset store, and it's all there. So I generally come to like Complete Projects, Tutorials, right here. And in here somewhere, yeah, right here, the Mechanim GDC 2013 is where I got this. So you can get it if you want. It probably will take a long time to download, so you may not want to worry about that right now. If you're following along, you can just use a plane, a cube, whatever. Or when this video is posted to the archive, you can download this grid set and follow along with the video, just whatever you would like. Okay. All right, fantastic. So basically, what we are doing today, like I said, I was talking about shooting bears with lasers and all that stuff, but what we're really doing is we are going to learn how to use raycasting and the line renderer and some materials and some collision, all right, to achieve a pretty neat effect. And the reason we're doing this video is because one of the questions I get asked a lot is how do we create laser beams, right? Everyone knows how to basically create a projectile and throw a projectile. You can just make pretty much anything and give it a velocity and just let it go, and there you go, you have a projectile. But laser beams are these continuous things, right, that are up the whole time. So they're a little bit different. We don't generally, use projectiles with those. And really, truly, if you're following along and you're trying to maybe make a high velocity projectile system in your game, like a machine gun or a sniper rifle and something like that, where you're not drawing the projectile anyway, you can basically do what we're doing here and just not use the line renderer, right? So it'll look like a really fast bullet, right? So there's a lot of things we can do to kind of to fool the system. So if you're not necessarily interested in lasers, but you are interested in shooting in general, this is still a pretty good video for you here, okay? And when we're done, we're going to talk about some of the things that we can do to make it better. So I try to keep my training sessions to roughly about an hour and not more. So when we're done with this, I'll talk about ways we can make it better, but we didn't necessarily have time to do today, because there's always ways to make stuff better, okay? All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So my intention with this, I mean, there's a lot of different ways we can do lasers, right? We could create a 2D game like a tank with a turret, or we could do all sorts of stuff. But my intention was to make sort of a first-person shooter, like a gun-based Battlefield, Call of Duty type gun shooting people, or shooting bears. I shouldn't say shooting people. That's kind of mean. But shooting things without feelings, that sort of thing, right? And so my very first thing is I'm going to want to use the first-person controller, all right? And now the first-person controller is a built-in asset. To get access to it, you'll just come up to Assets, Import Package, Character Controller, all right? The character controller right here, and you'll get a window that looks like this, and you'll just click Import. I'm not going to click Import because I've already imported it, but if you're following along, you need to import it. And you will get this nice little standard assets folder and then a character controllers folder. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to grab the first person controller and I'm going to drag it into my scene. And a couple things right off the bat. First is, here I'll show you. If I hit play right now, I'm going to just fall through the world. All right, and I'm going to fall to my death. And a lot of people get this wrong when using the first-person controller. You have to ensure that the controller is completely above the surface, otherwise they'll fall right through. So if they're even dipped in it just a tiny bit, the collision won't happen and they'll fall through. So you got to lift it up there. And then what I want to do is I want to rotate it so that it's facing the right way. So when I run my scene, I get something like this, and I can run around in my scene, and it looks pretty cool. And whoever made these assets, I know it was someone from Unity. They did a fantastic job. It looks awesome. I probably should have figured out who that was, but I didn't, so sorry. Okay, so now we have our first-person controller here, and I can look around, and I can look up and down, and all that stuff. So basically, I mean, the mechanical controls of a first-person game are kind of already built in for me, which is really nice. But I'm lacking a gun, right? I don't want to shoot like laser beams out of my eyes, even though that would be undoubtedly really awesome. It's not really what I'm going for here. So I need some gun, right? And for that, I could model a basic gun out of like a cube. And if you're following along, you may just want to do that. Just put a cube in the scene, and we can turn that into a gun. What I did, however, is I downloaded a gun asset. So what I did, and you know what? As a matter of fact, I already have it downloaded here. Yeah, I'll just leave it. I was going to delete it and re-download it, but I really don't want to make you guys wait through that, so I'm actually not going to do that. That was a terrible idea. So what I want to do is I'm going to come to Window, Asset Store again, and I am going to search for gun. Now, I think I see some people talking in the chat and whatnot. There are a ton of first-person shooter assets in the store. There are a lot of people that make like FPS bundles and assets and scripts and everything specifically for Unity. So, you know, go to the asset store and check this out. If you're interested in first-person games, like first-person shooters and whatnot, there's a lot of really good bundles out there. Yeah, so check them out, right? They're all on the asset store. But what I want to do is I want to grab this cartoon submachine gun. I could grab any of these other ones, but this one just happened to be free, and free is my favorite number, and so I decided to get this one. So basically, you'll just click on cartoon submachine gun, and you have this, well, you'll have a download button, and if you click next to it, you'll get download and import, right? I already have downloaded it, so it says re-download and import. But basically, once you have that, you'll just click the import button. You'll get that menu again, where it's like, hey, do you want to import all this stuff? And you'll just click import. So once again, I'm not going to go through those steps. If you want to follow along, you can just create a cube, right? Any cube. And just really just kind of elongate it and make it narrow. And to be a gun or whatever. I mean, you can certainly do that. Excuse me, I'm taking a sip of water. But you can certainly use a cube, whatever you want to do, right? Basically, I mean, even that is not necessary. We don't have to do that. We don't have to have a gun at all. We have one because it looks cool, but we could very easily just have our laser coming off the side of the first-person controller, and you don't need a gun at all. But I have a gun, so I'm going to use a gun. And so what I'm going to do is we are what have I clicked here? Oh yeah, so if you import the cartoon SMG, you will have a cartoon SMG folder. And by the way, whoever made the cartoon SMG, thanks. I guess I didn't mention the name or anything like that, but you saw it on the asset store, so thanks to that person. And it comes with a lot of stuff. We're not really going to use a lot of this stuff. All I really want is the model, right? So I'm going to come to the models folder and I'm going to pull out this SMG. And it's fairly large. It's a fairly large SMG. It's actually not an SMG, is it? It's a Tommy gun. I don't know if a Tommy gun is an SMG or not. I don't know. It's really kind of irrelevant at this point. But I have this model here, which is this machine gun. And what I want to do is I want to attach it to the camera of my first-person controller so that when I look around, the gun looks around with me, right? That makes sense. It's kind of how first-person shooter games go. And so what I want to do is, well, first and foremost, this gun is huge. So let me take the gun and... Do I have the gun selected? Oh, I also want to make sure that I'm selecting the parent level, not clip or gun, but the parent cartoon SMG prefab that gets dragged into the scene. And I want to make that 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, so it's a bit more manageable. And then I'm going to click it and drag it onto the main camera of my first-person controller. So I'll just drag it onto there so that it nests just like that. All right. There we go. And, oh, I see a couple people saying I must have missed something. Please don't swear in chat. I'm not a fan of swearing in chat, so please don't do that. That'll get you blocked. Okay, so anyway, so now we have this cartoon SMG prefab, which is a child object of the main camera of our first-person controller. And so now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of zero it out and then position it. So 0, 0, 0 with a rotation of 0, 0, 0. There we go. And if I actually run this, I have a gun in the middle of my head, which would, again, be pretty cool to have a gun in the middle of your head. But not exactly what we're going for. We'd kind of prefer the gun to be in our hands. So what we were going to do is we're just going to give it a real basic positioning here. I'm going to put it at 1, and then negative 0.96, and then 1. And this is something I determined ahead of time. All right. So if you're wondering where I came up with those numbers, I just moved it around till it looked good, and that's what I came up with. And now if I run my scene, you will see I have a gun, and I can run around, and I have a gun. And most importantly, I have a gun. So now I am able to, yeah, start shooting stuff. Not quite yet. I haven't built in any interactivity yet, but we have the basis for it. So I have my first-person controller. I have a gun, and now I can begin to build what I need to shoot stuff. Okay. So. There's a couple different ways we can do this, and there's some kind of standards, right? Like I could use the gun itself as the basis for throwing projectiles, and this is true if I'm talking about if I'm talking about throwing actual projectiles or lasers or anything else. I could use the gun, but that's kind of a right? That's not really a great way to go about it. A better way would be to fix an empty game object to the barrel of the gun and use that as the starting point for everything I do with the gun, right? So now, you know, that way we don't accidentally have collision with the gun, and we don't have any overlap with the gun and things like that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and build an empty game object and put it on the tip of the gun, and I'm going to use that as the basis for all of my shooting and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create an empty game object, and I will name my empty game object gun tip. All right, and this I'm going to go ahead and nest on the gun, which is nested on the camera, which is nested on the first-person controller. So we got a bit of a cascade going on there. All right, and so now I have this gun tip, which is a child object of the cartoon SMG prefab. And now I just need to position it. And again, this is something that I've already determined ahead of time. I'm going to position it 0, and then at 1.21, and then 2.71. All right, and you will see that it happens to be right at the tip of the gun. It's not in the gun. It's not far out of the gun. It's right on the tip. That way we don't accidentally have any weird bullets jumping or whatever, or bullets hitting the inside of the gun or anything like that, which would be admittedly not good. So there we go. And you can see that doesn't really affect anything. I'm still able to run my scene, and I can't see it. It's just an empty game object. All right, fantastic. So, to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to do, we basically want, so we're going to use a line renderer, and a line renderer basically has 2 points, point A and point B, and then it draws a line between those 2 points. So the point A, or point 0, if you will, it's going to be the tip of our gun, and the point B is going to be wherever we send it, right? And for our default, we'll use something like 100 units forward or whatever, right? To kind of illustrate the point, I have made a very fantastic high-res image for all of you to show you what I'm talking about. So I hope you're ready to be amazed and wowed at all the work I put into this. So we have here a demonstration of what we want this gun to do. And I have labeled the start and end positions of the laser, which I have entitled Pew Pew Laser, to kind of show you what we intend to do. So the laser is going to start at the very tip of the gun. It's obviously going to go down some distance. And the reason we put the gun tip on the gun like we did, and actually, whoops, I need to change something here. We want the gun, basically the gun laser to align with the barrel of the gun, so everything seems like it's going pretty straight. All right, which reminds me at this point, so hopefully you all got to truly appreciate my artistic skills. That's all paint right there. One thing I forgot to notice is that my gun tip is pointed the wrong way. So I forgot to notice that there was a rotation on it. Now it's correct. So yeah, I definitely would have screwed that up there for a second if I had forgotten that rotation. I would be shooting myself with a laser, and that's not exactly what I wanted. Okay, so another reason that I have an empty game object on the tip of the gun for the line renderer is a line renderer should not go on any other object that already has a renderer, right? So my Cartoon SM prefab has a renderer for these models, and my first-person controller has this capsule mesh and stuff like that. So I have an empty game object without any other renderers, right? And so that allows me to put a line renderer on it, which is what I'm going to do now. So to add a line renderer, I'm just going to click Add Component, and then Effects, and then Line Renderer. All right. And we'll see that the gizmo, the handles, kind of disappears, and it goes over there. And if I go over here, I see my line. Doesn't it look great? That's my laser. All right, thanks for coming out, everybody. That's the end of the session. No, I'm joking. How awesome would it be to just be like, there's your laser, see y'all later. So what we want to do is we want to basically use this particular line we see there as the laser of the gun. Now the thing about a line renderer is it's rendering a line, and we don't necessarily want to see this line renderer all the time, right? We only want to see it when we're shooting stuff. So we're going to have to write some scripts. Well, actually we're going to write one script that's going to both manage the shooting of the laser and manage the turning it on and off, right? So that we're not seeing it when we don't want to see it. Also, you'll notice it's this awesome pink color, and we're going to fix that as well. So what I want to do is I have created a folder here, which I've just called lasers, and you'll see I have a bunch of sample scenes in here. But what I want to do is I'm going to create a script. So I'm going to go create C# script, and I'm going to call it laser script. Now, this is the first time this has come up in one of these live sessions, but I have a really loud mechanical keyboard. So I apologize that you're all about to be just completely deafened by my keyboard. I meant to get a quieter keyboard, and then life happened and I didn't. So I apologize right now. I'm going to try to talk and then type, right? So that I don't actually type over my talking and make it really hard to understand me. But I've created this laser script. I've made it in C#. You can do all of this in JavaScript or the Unity script. I just prefer C#. You know, it's preference. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my gun tip, and I'm just going to click and drag my laser script onto there, and that's that. So let's go ahead and let's open up my laser script here. All right, and we'll give this a second for Mono to open up while I take another sip of water. Only the finest H2O. All right. So a question, and we'll answer it here in a second by actually working with it. But the script, the question is from Mika here. What does the script do? It's going to be responsible for turning the laser on and off, and actually shooting the laser. So the cool thing about a laser is that it doesn't. get bigger over time. It travels at the speed of light because it's a laser, so we can just like flick it on and back off again really fast, and it looks really cool. All right, so I have the classic Unity script stuff here, which, you know, some of this I'm going to need, some of it I'm not. And one of the things I generally like to do when I start is handle some formatting here. It's personal preference, whatever you like, but I generally get rid of the comments and I fix the spacing and stuff like that. There we go. So what we need is a couple different things. First is we're going to need some in-script representation of this line renderer. Sorry, I'm reading the chat while I'm in here, so I do apologize for that. But yes, the pink plane, so the quick question is, where was that pink plane from? That is the line renderer that I added, and it just appeared. Okay, and so what we're going to do now is we're going to use script to kind of reel that in and make it more manageable. So I need some in-script representation of my line renderer. So I'm going to create a line renderer variable, which I'm just going to call line. Okay, and that's that. So in the start method, I'm going to get the component that is the line renderer and just assign it to that variable. Now I will say this, if you're not super familiar with scripting, some of this is going to seem weird. This is a kind of an intermediate level tutorial, so we are just going to go ahead and script on, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the script itself. If any of this doesn't make sense to you, feel free to check out our multitude of free videos on the Unity3D.com/learn site, and you can always come back and rewatch this video. It will be available on YouTube and on our site, so you can come back and see it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the script. Yeah. So what we're going to do now is we are going to use the get component to assign the laser, our line renderer, to our line variable. So I'm going to call GameObject.getComponent, and since I'm using C#, I have to write it this way, line renderer, just like that. So this will get the line renderer and assign it to that variable. And then the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to say line.enabled equals false. What we just did, by the way, is we acquired the line renderer and we turned off the, we disabled it when we started the game, so we can't see it anymore, which is exactly what we want. Also, I want you to notice that when I run my scene, I see my mouse cursor still, right? And it's really distracting because I'm trying to shoot a gun, and it's like having a fly in front of your face, and it's just really kind of annoying. So what I'm going to do is I want to also disable the that mouse cursor. All right. So let me click out of here, and I'm going to go the old-fashioned way of doing that. Luckily, or hopefully nothing crashes there. There we go. Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, I can make the font a little bit bigger there. So there you go. Apologize for the small font. I'm recording at 1080p, so hopefully you're in full screen. If you're not, it's going to be a bit small, so let me make that a little bit bigger. I can do even a little bit bigger than that. There we go. So, okay, so one of the question is, the weapon points to the same direction as the character, so the weapon will not point to the center of the screen, or we'll do something against that later. You're correct. The laser won't point to the exact center of the screen. That was one of those things that I talked about improving it in future iterations. So we will talk about that, but you're correct. There's a bunch of different ways that we can, we could do shooting from camera main, transform forward. There's a lot of caveats, and I'll explain them here later, but basically, I'll talk about this and then we'll get back to that. So what I want to do is, now that we've disabled our line renderer in the start, I also want to lock the screen. So I'm going to see, or lock the cursor, I'm sorry. So I'm going to say screen.lockCursor equals true. So I don't have that cursor in the way anymore, which gets really kind of annoying flying around. So now if I come back to Unity here and run it, you'll see that my mouse cursor disappears, all right? Which actually makes it hard to stop the video. Unless you hit Control P or Command P will stop the scene. So there you go. Okay, so far so good with our script. So now we've acquired our line renderer, we've disabled it in the start mechanic, or the start function, and we've locked our screen. All right. And so, okay, so there's a question here is there's screen hide cursor and screen lock cursor, and I'm choosing screen lock cursor. Screen hide cursor only hides the cursor in the screen. Lock cursor centers the cursor on the center of the screen and then locks it, prevents it from moving, so that I can't accidentally click outside of the window and re-show my cursor and kind of mess things up. So that's the key with lock cursor, and that's why I'm using lock cursor, because it prevents me from accidentally clicking outside of the window. Alright, so I've done all that, so let me come into my update method here, and my update method is basically going to be responsible solely for determining whether or not I have clicked the fire button, which by default the fire button is linked to left mouse in Unity. And so I'm going to say if input.get button down, alright, and then I'm going to look for the button fire 1. So if that happens, we're going to call a coroutine. Right? So we're basically, JD asked the question, what's the script attached to? The script is attached to the gun tip game object that has the line renderer on it. All right? So yeah, so it's on the gun tip, not the gun, not the camera or anything like that, the gun tip, which we created that empty game object that has the line renderer itself. All right, so what we want to do is we want to create a coroutine. Okay, and the coroutine will be responsible for keeping the laser alive. Because we don't want to pull for this laser stuff every frame. We kind of want to let the coroutine handle that. So before I go through starting the coroutine and all that stuff, I'm going to actually write it down here. Okay, that's correct. Also make sure that the gun tip is facing the right way. If you remember this, remember not to point the tip of the gun at your eye. I actually very painstakingly pointed that out. So if you accidentally shoot yourself in the eye, it's shame on you because I have warned you expressly. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and create this coroutine which I will use to continuously fire the laser. And in C#, the coroutine is an IEnumerator return type, which I'm going to call fire laser. Alright, fire laser. And so what I'm going to do when I fire the laser is I'm going to do some very basic stuff. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say line.enabled equals true, right? I want my line to turn back on so that we can see it. And while my line is on, so we basically want to say while we're holding that fire button, we want the laser to be shooting, okay? So I'm going to say while, all right, input.getButton. Now notice I'm saying get button and not get button down, alright? The difference is get button down fires only one time when we first press it. Get button fires, or is called every time we continue to hold it, alright? So, yeah, so we want to use get button, not get button down. Alright, and inside here we're going to create an array, and then we're going to set this line renderer based off our array, and then we're going to return, we're going to yield null, right, and we're going to continue this loop, and I'll kind of explain it as we're going through. So I want to say ray, so I'm creating a ray, equals new ray, and the ray's position is going to be transform.position, so this will be, the ray will start on the gun tip, and we want to say transform.forward, so the ray will be facing the direction of the gun tip. So basically, this ray is going perfectly aligned with the gun barrel because the gun tip is aligned with the gun barrel. And then we're going to say line.setPosition. Now this is for our line renderer. Remember that the set position is going to start at the tip of the gun. So that's our 0 position, right? Our 0 index, because in computer science we start counting at 0, and it's going to start at ray.origin. Just like that. So the first end of the line is the tip of the gun, which is where the ray starts, and then we're going to set the second position of the gun, or of the line, and we're going to say set position, not set width, set position, and this will be for the second point, which will be 1, right? And we're going to say ray.getPoint, and we are going to say 100. So this is going to be the point that the ray is at 100 units forward. All right. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to say yield return null. By the way, if you're not super familiar with coroutines, we've got great videos on coroutines, Unity3D.com/learn. You can go see all about how coroutines work. But basically what this is saying is every frame, this is going to keep looping, and it's outside of update. It's going to keep looping itself, right, while we're holding down the fire button. When we stop holding down the fire button, this while loop will exit, and we want to say line dot, line dot enabled. I've lost my IntelliType there. Line dot enabled equals false. Okay. This effectively enables me, or tells it, hey line, we're done shooting, so disappear. Go away because we're not shooting you anymore. Alright. And so now I have this all set up. This is everything that I need. We're creating an array. We're setting the line to be at the beginning of the array and the line to be at the end of the array. It's going to travel the whole distance of the array. The reason we're using array, you might be wondering why are we using array, since we can put any vector3 in here. The array will help later when we're actually going to be shooting stuff. Alright, so now that we have our coroutine done, here inside my update, if we press the fire button the first time, what I'm going to say is I'm going to say stop coroutine, just in case it happens to already be going and something malfunctioned. We're going to stop it first, and then we're going to start it again. Just in case. I really shouldn't have to do the stop coroutine, because the second I let off my fire button here, this should exit, and so when I click it again, it'll start. But this is a failsafe, just in case. I don't want to accidentally have two, or anything weird, or anything like that. Okay. So, yeah, I see in the chat some people are asking. This is C#. I'm using C#. You can do Unity script, JavaScript, boo, if you want, but I just use C#. So at this point, this script is ready to test. Okay. So to kind of give you an idea of what's going to happen, for starters, we're disabling the line. If we press the fire button, we're starting the coroutine. When we start the coroutine, we are entering into a while loop that will continuously shoot the ray until we let go of the fire button. Okay, and that's basically what is happening here. So let me come back to Unity. Hopefully I don't have any errors. I don't. And I'm going to run it. And now what we have is, boom, we have a laser. It's a giant laser, but we have a laser. Okay, so we can shoot stuff. All right. Just like that. Boom, boom, boom. All right. There we go. All right. A question, any overhead to using string parameter in start coroutine instead of IEnumerator parameter? No. The reason we use the string parameter is so that we can call stop coroutine. Stop coroutine is only usable if we started it with the string parameter, which is why we use that. If, like I said, if you have questions about coroutines, please check out our video on coroutines. Now, as you notice, that laser was huge. Oh, another question. Inline.setPosition, what is the first parameter for? So a line has 2 points, right? The beginning point and the end point. So that first parameter specifies which end of the line we're talking about, right? So point 0 is where the line starts, and point 1 is where the line ends. Okay, so that's what that first parameter is. So let me go ahead and reduce the size of this line. And one of the cool things we can do is we have a start width and an end width, so we can actually make it get bigger or get smaller as it goes. We don't need to do that now, but we can, you know, just so you know. But I'm going to make this 0.15, and then 0.15. There we go. That should be a much more reasonable size. Whoops, I did not mean to open up the floor there. So now, if it's 0.15, we can see our laser is a much more reasonable size. Okay. There we go. All right. So yeah, we've set it to just be a little bit thinner, and then it fits into our gun much more readily. Again, that's something that I've determined ahead of time, so if you're wondering where I came up with that, I just tried different numbers until that one worked. Okay, so now we have this laser shooting out of our gun, right? And so we successfully have a laser. If I hold the button, it stays held down, right? And I can shoot the ground and whatnot. As soon as I let go, it goes away. Then I click it again and I let go. So we have a laser, and that's great. But it's kind of boring, right? One of the biggest problems with our laser right now is that, let's say if I come over here to this wall and I shoot my laser, you will notice that my laser passes right through the wall. Well, that's not great, right? We want a laser to hit something and then stop. Okay, that's kind of what we want. Yeah, that's kind of what we want. We want the laser to end when it hits things. So that's one of the reasons we used array. is we can now say, hey, send the ray out, and if the ray hits something, that's where our laser ends. And if it doesn't, then have it keep going. Okay, yeah, it's a very high-powered laser. There you go. That's one way to say it. Super high-powered. So what we want to do is we want to modify this laser, this line renderer, to utilize the benefits of the ray. So I'm going to open MonoDevelop here again, and now I'm just going to modify this a little bit. So I've created my ray, but I also want to create a ray hit. Oh, ray cast hit, called hit. All right, this will be responsible for holding whatever whatever this impacted. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read the chat. Okay, so a question, could you change the while to an if statement? Please see what that will change. If I turned it into an if statement, it would only run one time, and our coroutine would exit, and nothing would work. The reason we have a while is because when the return comes back, it loops again, and then when return comes back, it loops again. An if would only execute once, and that's not what we want. But anyway, back to the point. We have, oh, okay, so someone else asked, why does the line renderer showing as pink? That's just why it just shows as pink. That's kind of a default. I'll show you how to change it, but it just starts like pink, all right? So what we want to do right now is we want to utilize this hit. So instead of just setting the position, the end position, because the start position is fine, but the end position where it stops is what we're concerned with. So I want to say if physics dot raycast, all right, this is me actually shooting a ray out, and I'm going to say ray, because that's the ray we're using, and I'm going to say out hit, because we want to use a pass-by-reference version of this ray cast hit, all right? And we're going to say 100, so we're going to send it out 100 units. So this is to say if the ray hits something, right, because this will return true if our ray hits something, and false if it doesn't, we're going to say line.setPosition 1, which is the end of our line, and hit.point. And I'll talk about the benefits of this. Else, just send it off into infinity. All right. So this effectively allows us to manage that. So one of the questions is they're getting line.enabled equals true is giving them an error. More than likely, you have the script on a different object than what your line renderer is on. If your line renderer is on the on a different object than the script, it's not going to be able to find it. You're going to have problems. So yeah, so ensure that they're on the same one. Another question is why use coroutine over the update function? So that they don't run, what do I say? So they run in parallel, so I'm not necessarily pulling for updates in all of this stuff in my update. I don't want to have to call enabled equals true and enabled equals false in my update and use a lot of ifs for things like that, and have a lot of complex code in my update. I move that off into another module, into this fire laser function, so that it's not cluttering up my update function. It's basically why I do that. There's no performance impact, and at the same time, it allows me to keep my code modular. So if I need to mess with stuff that only handles with the fire laser, I don't have to sift through all my update code trying to find it. I just go to the fire laser method, and that's that, right? So that's, in a nutshell, that's why I do that. It keeps the stuff modular. So what are the implication parameters that the raycast receives? Are you talking about physics.raycast? So basically we pass in the ray we're using, which is the line we want, and then this hit is going to contain all of the information about what we hit, all right, in it, so that we can do hit.point. And let me show you. So we've typed this now. So let's come over here and hit play. And one of the questions, where do we say that fire1 equals click? That's just a default. That's in the input manager. If you want to make it something else, you have to go into the input manager and change it. Let's see here. And so now you can see that the laser does not pass through the wall. It is respecting the fact that it hits the wall and it's not going through. Okay? So at this point, we now have a laser that comes out of the gun, right? And can hit something, and that returns back what it hit, and that's good, right? So now our laser is a little bit more reasonable. So at this point, it's time to actually start shooting stuff. So you've all been very patient. You all patiently sat there while we set up our laser. But now let's shoot stuff, right? Because that's what everyone wants. We want to shoot things. And luckily for us, today we are going to shoot teddy bears, right? And so that's what we're going to have fun doing. So what I'm going to do is a couple things. First, I'm going to create or I'm going to import the teddy bears that we're going to be shooting, and then we're going to modify our code just a little bit. It's actually pretty simple. Luckily for us, the way we set it up using rays and everything, and with ray hits, makes the physics of the whole thing very, very simple. And so what I have here, what came with these tiles that I imported from the asset store was these teddy bear models, which is why we're shooting teddy bears, because I just decided to reuse that stuff. So in the Mechanim GDC 2013 set that I downloaded at the beginning, or that I showed you how to download at the beginning of this video, I am going to expand character and teddy bear, and I have a teddy bear right here. Now I have already added a rigid body and a capsule collider. If you download this, there won't be a rigid body or capsule collider on it. I just added it previously, and I didn't bother to remove it to show you. So I have it. If you're following along and you don't have it, you need to add it. It's just basically just component physics, add a rigid body, add a capsule collider. And then I'm going to click and drag my teddy bear right there. And there we go. And so now I'm just going to duplicate it a bunch, create ourselves a lineup. And I can fit one more in there. Two more. Oh, they're holding hands. They know what's coming. There we go. So now we have our teddy bears, right? And they have their rigid body and their capsule colliders. That's all well and good, but my laser doesn't do anything just yet. Okay? So now we need to add the code that makes my laser shoot these guys. So what we need to do, so basically we have our ray. Our ray is reporting that we hit the bear, right? So now all we need to do is say, if we hit the bear, right? Apply some force to it, and that's kind of what we're doing. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the script. All right, and we have this all kind of set up. So we're saying here, if physics raycast. So if we have a hit, all right, I'm going to add some brackets here because we're going to have multiple things. So if we have a hit, I'm going to say if what we hit has a rigid body. Because remember, we don't want to apply a force to something that does not have a rigid body, okay? Because it'll crash. It'll throw an error, and it'll be like, hey, that's a problem. We don't want that. So I'm going to say if hit.rigidbody, which will return false if what we're hitting does not have a rigid body. So now all I need to do is I need to say hit.rigidbody.add force at position. Okay, I could just add force, but that's boring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add force at position, and I'll explain the difference here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say add force at position, transform dot forward, all right, times 5, okay, comma, hit dot point. And so what this is effectively doing is it's adding 5 units of force to the direction the laser is going, right? That's transform dot forward times 5. I could store this in a variable, but I didn't. So it's just a hard-coded 5. And this is why the hit dot point is why we use add force at position. If I were to just use add force, it would add 5 units of force to the very center of the bear, which is nice, except if I shoot the bear in the arm or the head or the foot, it's still going to be pushed from the center of the bear. Luckily for us, since we're using raycasting, I can say add force at position and do hit dot point, and it will add to the force to exactly where I shoot the bear. So if I shoot it on the left, it'll spin to the left. If I shoot it to the right, it'll spin to the right. And we'll actually see this. But that's it. That's the one line of code. Let me save this here. Let's go back into Unity and let's play around with this. So I'll run my scene. And first and foremost, I can just boom and shoot the bear. But now look at what add position does, or at position. Boom, spins it that way. Or shoot it in the head. Boom, shoot it in the head. We can shoot it in the foot. Shoot it in the foot, right? Now, just so you know, we're using a capsule collider. So it's not like super accurate collision detection. You can see how these guys are rolling. We can actually continue to push them until they fall off the edge, right? It's kind of like that water gun at the carnival. Goodbye, bears. See ya. If we wanted more realistic collision, we'd have to use like colliders for the arms in the different parts and stuff like that. But as it stands, the capsule collider is good enough, right, to kind of give us realistic enough impact, right? So that's one of the cool things about the capsule collider is we can roll with it and it'll still recognize a bunch of different directions and stuff like that. But that's effectively what we're doing. So using the raycast, we are able to specify exactly where we hit the bear, which is neat because if we wanted to like have sparks fly out or blood effects or particles or whatever, we could instantiate that particle effect at the exact point where we hit it, right? So it looks very realistic, okay? And that's important, okay? So it's useful to be able to shoot or have impacts and stuff like that exactly where we actually hit. Okay, so at this point what we have is we have a gun that shoots a purple laser and it shoots some bears and the bears fall down. Okay, now that's cool, but let's talk about now make the force impact huge. We could, I mean we could sit there and be like 5,000. Is 5,000 huge enough? I don't know what's going to happen. That's really high. Let's see. 5,000. Pow, 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 pow. So yeah, that's a really high impact force that we can see there. And as a matter of fact, we just added force. If we added impact force, if we did rigid body dot add impact force, right? We just like, and those things would just be blown to pieces. But that's a bit high. So let's come back down to 5. Let's be reasonable, teddy bear overlords, because that's a bit much. So now that's all well and good, right? You know, we're shooting it with this purple laser, but I'm not a big fan of like this basic ugly magenta laser, right? So let's go ahead and spice it up a little bit. So I'm gonna minimize some folders here. I got a lot of folders open. In my lasers folder, what I want to do is I've created this texture that I like called rainbow, and we're just going to import that here, and we're going to build a rainbow laser. All right, because you know, rainbows are awesome. Now, let me highlight gun tip again for our line renderer, which will appear over here. Now, I could just click and drag this texture onto there, and I'm pretty sure that it won't render appropriately. Yeah, it's going to turn black, right? That's not exactly what we want. And the reason it turned black is because we want to use a special type of shader for this. We can use a bunch of different shaders, but the best shader to use for these is actually, where is it? Where's particles? Particles, vertex lit blended. For whatever reason, that's like the best shader to use for line renderers. And I'm also, so the emissive color right now is this dark gray. I'm actually going to make that white. And we can see here we kind of have the laserness or the rainbowness of it there. Let's go ahead and run it now. I mean, that's pretty basic. But now we have rainbow laser, okay? And we can shoot all the bears down, which is fun. So bear execution style with rainbows. Now, kind of one more thing I want to talk about here is, even this is kind of boring, right? I mean, lasers like look awesome and they glow and they do all sorts of cool stuff, right? And this laser just kind of right? So I've got one more trick that I like to do with lasers personally. So when I'm making a laser texture, I tend to have a little bit of like variance in it. Like maybe if I'm procedurally generating, I might use a sine wave to just give it a little bit of fluctuation. And then what I do is I mess with the UVs of the line renderer in real time, and then we can create some pretty cool stuff. Yeah, lens flares. We could put a lens flare on there. When we're done with this, if we got a few more minutes, maybe I'll put just a ridiculous lens flare on the end of that gun, and we'll see. But yeah, so what I want to do is I want to mess with the UVs of this a little bit. So I'm going to come back to my script, and while I'm inside this while loop here, while we're drawing this, I'm going to add a line to the top, and I just want to say line.renderer dot main texture, or I'm sorry, material dot main texture offset. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the offset to be a new vector 2. And inside here, I'm going to say 0 and time.time. Not time.delta time, time.time. Which, so we're not the difference in time, but the total amount of time. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm basically just offsetting the main texture by 0 and then by the time. Okay, so check out how this changes it. So when I run this now, check out this laser. Boom! And we get this cool, like, rotating laser bit, which is neat with the rainbow. If we had just minor variations in the texture, then yeah, die bears. Minor variations of the texture would be a much more subtle effect. We could also randomly jump around, and we can move down and move back up and whatnot. So we can mess with the texture just like we could with any other model, really, and create an effect there. Okay, so that's more or less all I wanted to talk about, but someone mentioned putting a lens flare on this, and I just cannot help but do that. I haven't, like, this isn't something I prepared, but I've just got to do this. So I'm going to go gun tip, and I am going to put a light on it. And I think that's under effects. No. That is under... Oh, I can never remember where the lights are. Nope. Rendering? Light. There we go. Actually, I think I can put... No, I can put a lens flare on it without the light, but I'm going to put a light on it. So what I'm going to do is when this goes off, we'll have it draw maybe a red light. And actually, yeah, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do flare. And I'm going to import some flares. So asset, import package, light flares. Oh yeah, I forget where everything is. Okay, so now that we have the light flares, I'm going to add a 5mm zoom. And then one more thing I want to do, just so this isn't like awful, is in here where it says line.enabled, line.disabled, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, this is like a terrible programming practice. Don't actually do this. I'm just doing it because I'm lazy right now. Light.enabled equals false. You really should store this in a variable and not do get component like this, but whatever. Just don't tell on me. We'll set it equal to true there, and then down here again, we'll set it back equal to false. So we can do this, and then let's come back to Unity, and so it'll be turned off, and we turn it on, boom, and we get our nice flare at the end of the. We can see the flare at the end of the gun there. So yeah, so you can see that we can add a flare to it with some light, so we get some light coming off the laser. Now, some of you might be wondering how you make the entire laser emit light, and we can do this by creating rays of point lights and stuff like that. But really, and just so you know, this is obviously my personal opinion, but with putting a point light on just the tip of the gun where it illuminates the things around you, you'll never notice that it's not illuminating past that point, really. If you think about it, because you'd be like, hey, it's illuminating, that's awesome. But you're not going to look like, 90 units down the screen and be like, hey, it's not lighting up down there. Your mind will just tell you that you're just not seeing it because it's so far away. So you really can get by with just putting basic illumination just right on the tip of the gun and not have to worry about it. And I can even crank this up a little bit and not have to worry about lighting up the whole way, right? Make it a little bit brighter or whatever. And you get this cool, like, lighting effect, all right? Yeah, so I really shouldn't have done that. Using get component all the time, like I just did, is a big no-no because it's got to look for that component, and that takes time. Really, I should have created a light variable here, stored it like I did with the line render, and just used that variable. But yeah, I'm lazy. So yeah, sorry about that. The thing about a spotlight, someone said you can use a spotlight on the with the point light. The spotlight will only illuminate what it hits in a forward direction, so it won't illuminate around, and so it's not going to give you a very realistic effect. It'll cast shadows in a direction that wouldn't be cast if the laser was was actually illuminating. Anyway, I'm digressing quite a bit here. So what we have now, just so we're aware, kind of sum things up. Man, that's a bright lens flare. We have a first-person character controller with a gun, all right, that now has a point light with a giant lens flare on it, that shoots lasers, okay? And we talked about how we can shoot the laser, have the laser hit things, how we can have, we can modify the textures and make the textures animate. So at this point, I'm pretty much done with this session. Let me read through the chat here real quick. We have some people talking about Persian apps. Please don't link weird stuff in the chat. I'm sure there's some reason you did that, but please don't. 1 second. Okay, and so I'm just seeing if we have any more questions. Could you use GameObject.light and we'll pick up the component? No, we have to use the get component. Is this the same thing with creating creating it on start then using? So basically, we're not creating it. We're just using a variable and finding it, and holding it, and so yeah. And you're correct. The laser. Well, yeah. Anyway, so we have all this question kind of digressing into the content of the code. And like I said, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the content of the script. But at this point, I'm kind of right on the hour mark, so I'm going to wrap things up here. So what we have now is we have a laser that shoots bears, and we have impact, and we have, more importantly, point impact, so we can spin them, and they're going to react very realistically. And you know, we have this hit dot point, which is returned from our raycast hit, and we can put particle effects at the end. We can do all sorts of stuff, but that's kind of beyond the scope here. So let me. I told you that I was going to talk about. How we could improve this. So as was kind of pointed out before, and this is something that's only really apparent once we get real close. All right, well, first off, yeah, my gun's kind of in the middle of the bear there, but it doesn't really line up with the center of the screen, right? You see how I'm hitting them kind of off to the side. And you might think, well, this is great, but I'm not aiming off to the side. If I had crosshairs in the center of the screen, this would be very unrealistic, and you'd be absolutely correct. You'd be absolutely correct that it would be unrealistic at close ranges. So if you wanted this to be a much more realistic effect, what I'd highly recommend you do is put the gun and the laser on a second camera, which is only set to render the gun and the laser, right? And since and if you draw that on top, you can always draw that directly into the middle of the screen, right? Without any what do I want to say? Without any impact, or I'm sorry, collision between the gun and any of the objects, and then just raycast from the center of the screen to the bear, and then use the line renderer to hit it that way. And that would be a much better way of doing this. So perhaps in another video or something, we'll go over more first-person shooter stuff. But that's something that you can maybe task yourself with figuring out how to do. Because I could get into it now, but we're kind of running out of time. But that's basically would create a much more realistic effect, and then you could put crosshairs in the center of the screen, and your laser would always shoot the center of the screen, regardless of how close or far away a bear was, and it would work pretty good. Now, one of the questions is, what would be the effect in hit that point? It would work just the same, right? Because hit that point will still be where the center of your screen is pointing, or the exact point where your center of your screen is hitting when you pull the trigger, and since your laser at that point will always be looking at the center of the screen, it'll work just fine. So yeah, you can certainly do that just fine. It'll work all just fine. But anyway, so at this point, I have pretty much wrapped up. And I'm just checking to see if there's any other thing. Is the ray trace the better way to make lasers or guns, or is it the only way? Well, you can use a line renderer without a ray, but the ray allows us to make our line renderer interact with the world in a much more efficient way than hand doing all those calculations. Okay. So this video will be, or has been recorded. I'm going to obviously make some edits because we did have that weird crash in the middle of it. And then I will upload it to our site in YouTube. So stand by if you do want to watch it again and kind of figure out what's happening. Again, I'm still running the game. Again, you can reach us on Twitter at Unity3D, at Mike Geig, which is me, at Will Goldstone, and at the Ant Ranch. If you have any questions, comments, or anything like that. If feel free to ask. One of the questions, can you give us some best practices to set up collision? I'm not entirely certain what you mean. Maybe you could clarify, or you could just shoot me a tweet or something later and I can answer it. So a lot of people are saying thank you now. You're very welcome. Hopefully it was fun and you got to shoot some teddy bears. I look forward to, if any of you want to make your own projects where you explode teddy bears or anything like that, I look forward to seeing it. Just shoot me a link. I always like seeing the stuff that you guys do. So any questions or anything like that, just pass them along. Otherwise, you all have a very fantastic day.